the interaction with European Parliament members, and I start with Mr. Peter Liese, coordinator of EPP ENVI.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to all speakers. The development of the COVID-19 vaccine in record time was really a great success of public-private partnership. But now we have a problem because delivery is not fast enough and Europeans are waiting for the vaccine. It is said that the European Union gets the vaccine later because we ordered later, but when you look at other countries, it's just not true. Canada ordered earlier, they get the vaccine later, they have less vaccination than the European Union. Israel ordered later, they get it first, they have a special deal. But besides this special deal of Israel, the main point is that those that have an export ban like the US or similar restrictions like the UK, they are better served. So my question to Mrs. Wang from Pfizer, is Pfizer ready to engage with Joe Biden, Boris Johnson and Mr. Soryot to stop their UK and US first policy, or are you otherwise prepared for an EU export ban for your product? And a short question only to Mr. Stoffels. You have a good vaccine. It will be approved soon. Your benchmark should be BioNTech Pfizer. They delivered the vaccine a few days after approval, even though there was Christmas time. Is that your benchmark? Are you following AstraZeneca, and are you prepared for the shitstorm that will arrive for Johnson & Johnson if you don't deliver? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Liese. I go now to Mr. Nicolas González Casares, please.
Gracias.
Thank you very much, chairs, and thank you very much to all of the company representatives and all of those who have contributed to the global success of vaccines. But of course, this vaccine has to be made available to everybody in Europe and in the world. So, of course, it's great that one of these vaccines will cover 70% of European needs. You committed to expanding production. We should therefore reach that 70%. Are you really committed to achieving that? Now to Pfizer and BioNTech. The new variants are a problem, but your technology can easily be adapted. How much time do you think you need to adapt your vaccine to a new strain, to a new variant, and produce vaccines that will also protect against the new variants? Thank you. I'll give the floor to Ms. Véronique Trier-Lenoir.
Oui, juste pour vous... OK, c'est déjà là.
Right, are you there now?
Parce qu'elle a raised hand. Ah, OK, je vous en prie.
Je suis là, merci.
I'm there. Thank you. Thank you very much. As a doctor and as deputy coordinator of Renew for the ENVI committee, I would like to thank you for attending this hearing today, and I hope that in future cooperation and agreements between pharmaceutical labs will continue in the production of the vaccine, but also, why not, for other active substances in medicines. We are all looking to you. But of course, now we have to put in place a European network of companies in order to increase vaccine production. So I've got one question to the three companies, but I'll put it to Mrs. Wang on the European Battery Alliance. That would be an example, perhaps, to follow. Would you be prepared today to actively and collectively participate in what we would call a common European cluster cooperation platform of common interest for the COVID vaccine? Thank you.
Madame Dolores Montserrat, former Minister of Health in Spain.
Thank you very much. La COVID-19 con sus variantes.
COVID-19 and its variants, unfortunately, has come to stay for quite a long time. Therefore, we need to increase our vaccine production, and the pharmaceutical industry has shown that it is a strategic sector for public health throughout the world. Europe is a leader in research and clinical trials, but scaling up production depends on other countries' cooperation as well, including Asian countries. So my question is to Angela Huang. Europe has to be attractive to investment in order to develop pharmaceuticals and to attract the auxiliaries in this sector. So how can Europe make itself more attractive to have more stable supply chains so that we are prepared for any global health crisis in future? And second question is, do you think that a system of incentives, tax incentives for production or incentives to develop new technologies or for our supplier companies, do you think all of those incentives might help our supply chain be more stable in Europe and increase our production capacity as a result?
I go first to Madame Huang. Many questions addressed to her, and then to Dr. Stoffels. Madame Huang.
Your questions. Thank you for your questions. I'll take the first one regarding the export bans and our work with the US and the UK and the supply of their vaccines. I want to reiterate that our supply and the delivery schedule of our vaccines everywhere around the world, regardless of which country it is all based on our supply agreements and the contracts that were created with each one of these entities. In addition to that, early stage, it was the timing of all of the deliveries were also affected by the timing of the approvals of the vaccines. And we know that both for the UK as well as for Israel as well as for the US, these approvals came early in December, and therefore the delivery schedules followed the approvals of those particular countries. But further to your question of export bans, we are not in favor of that. And the reason is that we have seen through this pandemic and seen through the success of our own vaccine that it was reliant on a complex web of collaborations throughout the world. Just to put this in context, our vaccine uses 280 materials from 86 different supply sites across 19 different countries. And therefore, the ability for us to have a successful vaccine production relies on our ability to have open trade channels and to be able to import and export around the world. And so our efforts are deeply focused on ensuring that we keep these lines open, and that in the end, it's about ensuring that we can access the network to ensure that we can get the raw materials that we need, but also products that we need from around the world also need to be able to move freely across different countries. Just a reminder that earlier in the pandemic, in March, when the need for ICU medicines became very significant in Europe, we were able to actually import. I was able to move product both from our Asia sites as well as from our US sites over to Europe to be able to supply essential medicines. And so Pfizer really stands behind a trade system that is open and that allows us to import and export freely. The second question, I think, was related to, are we committed to expanding production? And are we committed in particular because the variants are a problem, and how much time would we need? So let me reassure everybody that we are here at Pfizer deeply, deeply committed to expanding our production. We started at a production plan of 1.3 billion doses for the world. You just heard me say in our statement that we have now increased that to 2 billion globally. Of that 2 billion, a large majority of that is coming from Puurs in Belgium. And this is our largest site in Pfizer, in the Pfizer network, and is our largest vaccine producing site. So a great deal of investment and a great deal of effort is focused on that. And the reason we are doing this is because we know that the world needs more doses, and it needs more doses now, but we also need to be ready for the variants. And so the manufacturing improvements that we purposely made in January so that we could upgrade our systems to deliver the 2 billion doses were very, very important. every single day, we are able to increase our production, and every month that improves, so much so that by June of this year, PURS will be delivering 100 million doses per month, and it increases throughout the year. And just to give you a sense
kind request to concentrate, because we will have still many questions to come.
Okay, well then let's move to then the next question, which is, just to finish off on the variants, how much time do we need? Based on the mRNA technology, we believe that we need approximately 100 days to be able to produce a new vaccine. Obviously, this needs to factor in regulatory discussions and regulatory approvals, which are in the hands of our regulators. And then as it pertains to our willingness to participate in common platforms for vaccine production, I think here, just to emphasize that Pfizer is deeply invested in making sure that our vaccine is accessible to anybody and everyone in the world. But the way to do that is to ensure that we have a vibrant IP system and a strong intellectual property platform whereby we can develop our innovations. It is in fact, indeed, the whole reason why we were able to collaborate with BioNTech, collaborate with all of these suppliers so quickly so that we could come up to speed to developing as well as manufacturing our vaccine. So we will continue to do so. And finally, I think there was a question around how to ensure that our supply chains continue to be stable. Actually, I think that the plans that we just made in PURS recently to increase different aspects of our supply chain, as well as expand our fill finish, expand our formulation capacity, improvements in our yield, are all a demonstration and evidence of the stability of our supply chain. And so with additional raw materials, human resources, machinery, all of those is all that we need to be able to make more. We don't have an infrastructure and we don't have a know-how problem.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Dr. Stoffels, please.
With regard to our production process, it's a very complicated, different production process where you have a vaccine, a live, non-replicating vaccine produced on a cell line, and then filled in sterile conditions under BSL-2. And so in the US, we had access to an existing facility with the US government already built 8 years ago, as part of a program which we were doing with them on developing vaccines for Ebola, Zika, HIV. And we also had access to existing facilities for BSL-2 filling. In Europe, we had our own facility at lower capacity. We started building a new downstream April last year, new buildings, huge work. It's in the making. It's almost done. And so we had no facilities to fill the BSL-2 live virus. And so we now have a network in the world which can do both and will be able to deliver on our 1 billion, 200 million to the Commission, and will work with the discussion platform between countries and the industry to get a more detailed supply schedule as we progress to our approval. On the variants, tomorrow you will hear at the advisory panel, and we made that public, that a vaccine which we extensively tested in South Africa, when it comes to the severe disease, it has no different than in the West, and we protect it highly against severe disease, death, and hospitalization, even with the variants. On the research, I think it comes down to long-term commitment for innovation. On the one hand, on R&D, on the other hand, on manufacturing capacity, and especially in pandemic preparedness, you don't know what's going to happen. So multiple vaccine innovation needs to happen, as well as preparedness for pandemic and production. And transferring technology, we are transferring technology to India. And if we get our 3 manufacturing plants up, this year we can deliver 1 billion. Next year we can deliver more than 2.5 billion vaccines to the world, 1 dose, 1 person. So that means large capacity to vaccinate the world in the next 2 years.
Thank you. So we move now to the next 4 questions, starting with Michel Rivasi for the Greens for 1 minute.
Merci.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. Thank you to the CEOs from the labs. I have a couple of questions for you. Firstly, on contract transparency. My question is for Johnson & Johnson and also for Pfizer. Why are these contracts not publicly available? You signed them with the European Commission. Why are they not online for consultation? In the United States, they are publicly accessible online. So I would ask you for a specific answer on that. Second question, you talk about a platform, 7.8 billion people in the world. This is a global pandemic. You talk about 1 billion doses by 2021, 2 billion for Pfizer. But that's not sufficient to address the pandemic. So will you commit to suspend your patents and to put your know-how on the WHO's CETA website to ensure that other countries around the world can be helped? India and South Africa are in a position to produce if you suspend your patents and carry out knowledge transfer. I'd like specific answers, please, on that.
Patricia Toya for SND.
Thank you. To Pfizer. I know you're doing everything you can. You said that, we believe you, and that you're in cooperation for production on a voluntary basis, but that's not enough. That's been recognized by colleagues. When it comes to the quantity of doses required immediately in the future and in terms of speed, because otherwise people are dying, the economy is dying. We're politicians. We have to meet citizens' right to health and have a moral duty to look at all possible options. And we're asking for your cooperation. If, by necessity, we actually suspend patents and obligatory licensing, would you cooperate? This wouldn't be aimed against you. But what we're doing is trying to ensure that people's rights are complied with. And when I'm not talking about patents, I'm not just talking about the forms. I'm talking about technology, transfer and know-how, because all of that is vital in the medium and short term. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bernier Weiss for EPP.
Thank you so much. The upcoming months will define the forthcoming years of the EU when it comes to vaccines and the framework conditions for the pharma sector in the EU. However, I do not hope that we will redefine these frameworks conditions compared to what we have today. Of course, EU have been challenged during the COVID-19 crisis, and we should do our utmost to prevent such a situation in the future. But are export bans, nationalisation and more control over the EU pharma companies really a way to go? I think no. My question goes to Pfizer. How do you suggest that we should work together in the future in order to overcome the challenges of tomorrow? Would a stronger focus on public and private partnerships with efficient licensing models to maximize use of production capacity be a method to ensure a resilient EU when it comes to the threat of future pandemics, while preserving our European principles, which is market-based and open to the global supply chains and the world around us? I hope so. Thank you.
Thank you. The last question for this group, Marcus Buchet for ID.
Could you please press the speak button?
Once again. Okay, great. Herzliches Dankeschön an die Industrie.
Thank you very much to the industry for coming here today and being ready to discuss things with us. My question is to Pfizer. I read explicitly today that there are bottlenecks due to supply chains. So I have a question about resilience. What would you propose to be better prepared for future pandemics in this regard? So what particular bottlenecks were there in the context of BioNTech? What were the products that were in short supply in the first phase of the delivery from your production facilities? Thank you.
So we move to the answers, starting with Angela Wang from Pfizer.
Okay. Thank you for your questions. I'll take them one by one. Okay, first one around contracts and making them public. So first of all, I want to emphasize that Pfizer is very much in favor of transparency, and we have engaged in an unprecedented level of transparency throughout the development process. It began with the publications of the work that we were doing in our clinical trials and sharing the data as soon as we had them. We published quickly, and to the fact that we even published in preprint servers and made our data available so that people could access them as quickly as possible and online. And so that has been our principle from the beginning, including how we are sharing information about our dose deliveries and our schedules so that planning and logistics can take place. I think it's important to note, though, that the contracts that we signed and under which these the dose deliveries are based are confidential with each country that we have signed them with. And Pfizer respects the confidentiality of these countries. And the reason this is important is for two reasons. I mean, first of all, we're still in discussions with many, many countries, and we have ongoing negotiations. So we have to make sure that there is not information that can be used throughout the negotiations that it could either compromise us or color the negotiations for a particular country. In the contracts are also certain information around our product and our methodology, our manufacturing methodology, which is private. Otherwise, it would compromise our competitiveness in the market. So what we have done instead is to work with the European Commission to provide, and we're working with them right now, to provide a redacted version of this contract so that the information that the public should have access to, they can, and that the information that is proprietary to the company or out of respect for different governments, because every contract looks a little different depending on what the government wants, that we honor the confidentiality of the governments. The second question was around the desperate need for more doses and whether we would commit to suspending patents. Again, just to remind everyone that it was because of a strong patent system that we were even able to manufacture and develop this vaccine in the first place. And as we've just talked about, the crisis is not over. We have variants that are coming. We need to continue to do our research and continue to understand, what it is that we need to do to manage the new variants or manage future diseases. And so it is really important to us that we uphold very strictly our IP foundation and ensure that the IP network is strong. That doesn't mean, though, that we don't, and that would get in the way of us providing access to our vaccine to everyone who needs it. And in fact, just to reinforce, our issue right now is not know-how and it's not infrastructure. We have figured all of that out to the point where we were able to go from 1.3 billion doses to 2. We are now every single day looking at how we can make more. The issue you also have to remember is that there are a lot of ancillary things that are required to make this vaccine, like raw materials. Very much in the beginning, and we talked about this earlier in the hearing today as well, that this is all de novo. We've never made an mRNA vaccine before. We need lipids. Just as an example, and lipids were not readily available. So I think we need to think broader than when we talk about vaccine production, we need to think broadly about what are all the components that are required, where they come from, and how can we ensure that we have an active supply of all of those things.
Thank you. I'm very sorry, but if you could go to your conclusion in 30 seconds.
Yep. The last question was around bottlenecks to supply chains. I think it's, my conclusion there is that having an open trade system that allows us to import, export, whether it's product or raw materials, is what we need to ensure that we have a robust supply chain here in Europe.
Thank you very much. So there were 2 questions to Johnson & Johnson, Mr. Stoffels.
Yeah, want to first on contract transparency. We have our contracts available with minimal redaction, so I think that is very clear that we are transparent in everything we do. minimal reduction. For me, the availability of vaccines at the moment, the best chance for the world to get fully vaccinated is focusing on all the vaccines which are there. There are several viral vector vaccines, mRNA and protein vaccines. If all these companies with all their capabilities, like us, we focus on getting it done, there will be vaccines for the entire world. And making that happen with the capabilities of the existing companies and their experience is the highest chance to get there. So any tech transfer starting from the ground with regard to technology we have will take 1 to 2 years, at least one, most of the time 2. From the 100 facilities we checked in the world, most of them could not deliver any vaccine before 2022. And that is where focusing now with the highly technical and specialized people on what we do to make sure we maximize capacity. And at the moment, we do it not for profit for the pandemic. So there will be no benefit using our people at the moment to transfer technology around the world because it will not be productive for more vaccines.
Thank you. And we move to Thomas Trion for Sanofi. Okay, so
Could you please press the speak button?
Okay, so we move to the next set of questions and we'll be back to Sanofi later on.
We'll take the whole interventions together because we have also our esteemed and important commissioner, Thierry Breton, which will have to address us. And the next speaker is Mr. Alexandre Vondra. 1 minute.
Thank you very much. So my question goes to Angela Huang from Pfizer. Congratulations, it's a huge success in a record time, and it had to cost a lot of money, especially in the R&D. And can you give us a rough comparison in the rough numbers, how much you were able to raise in the United States, including the capital market on one hand, and in the EU or EU member states, including BioNTech on the other hand? And secondly, Israeli program is a huge success, and it's my understanding that it was possible also due to the high level of digitalization in the Israeli healthcare. Given the fact that in the EU, the digitalization in the healthcare is just in a stone age, is there anything you would advise us to do in our reforming attempts in the healthcare to work with the data and so on to be prepared next time for the similar situation?
Thank you so much, Monsieur Dominique Riquet.
Thank you. I had a question to Ms. Wong. Thank you very much indeed for your comments. There was a question put by Mr. Gonzalez that was not responded to. In the event of new resistant variants, particularly with mRNA, how long would it take to find an industrial solution at an industrial scale to roll it out and find a solution? And then for Mr. Stoffel, another question. We've understood that it's very complex. There was a lot of capital investment required in order to set up a production line for new vaccines in order to satisfy a global pandemic. How long will you be able to maintain a production line dedicated to COVID? I imagine it will depend how long the pandemic lasts, but it might also be something that would hinge on your plans. Secondly, will it have a bearing on your technical abilities, your HR and your capital? Will it affect your ability to tackle other pathogens, other diseases that might occur, or indeed other categories of drugs?
The next speaker.
Thank you, chairs. I have a question for Pfizer. What are the possibilities of increasing production capacity by having it being done together with university and research institutes? Is this something that has been discussed? And if you are putting this on the table together with the different universities and institutions concerning storage capacity, I have a question that there has been some information that showed that there's not much loss of efficiency when stored in higher temperatures than those that are done at the beginning, those initially recommended. Can you confirm this? And as this will have severe impacts on the distribution, especially for low and middle income countries where lower temperature storage are much more difficult to obtain. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Christoph Hansen, the next speaker.
Yes, thank you very much. And first of all, I would like to say thank you for those who have already published the contracts. I think it's very important that the EU citizens knows where his money goes to. But on the other hand, I think this is not helping to enhance production, neither does it slow down production. So we should focus on what is really helping, and therefore we know, of course, no export restrictions as well for the components of the vaccine have been a problem. So the lipids and the molecules that you need. So do you have an estimation how much delay you got in production because of products, first material that you didn't get on time? And then there is a lot of the idea of reshoring production to the EU going around. Personally, I don't share this. What would you reply to those who want to reshore production to the European Union? And third question, what other irritants do you see at international trade level that could be removed to help you to produce faster? Personally, I very much agree on those who have said that Mrs. Wang has said this, that we need open markets for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Monsieur Mark Botenga.
Dank u wel. Eerste vraag aan Pfizer. U legt...
Thank you very much. First question to Pfizer. You talked about the importance of patents. Your technology, however, is being developed with public subsidies, not patents. And Pfizer is expecting 15 billion in extra profits, 30% profit margin, not to mention bonuses. So the only thing that has no delay in this crisis is your profits. And of course, you're getting these profits by refusing to share patents, and yet you make up 23% of global production capacity. Share the technology, then we could produce more vaccines. Are you ready to give priority to public health over your income and then the interests of your shareholders and your profits? So if that is the case, then you should release the patents working through the WHO. But if it is no, the answer is no. Why? Secondly, you've been accused of blackmailing certain countries. Countries are going to have to sort of mortgage their embassies in order to pay for the vaccines. Is that true?
Madam Maria Carvalho, next speaker.
Thank you very much, Chair. My question is to Mrs. Wang from Pfizer. Preliminary results on real-world data from Israel are very encouraging, and good results with a scenario about 80% of cases caused by the so-called UK strain of the virus. Of course, we need to wait for the detailed analysis of this data and the peer review report. This is just data that I got in the internet and reports. Anyway, I would like to ask if Mrs. Wang, if you have already early evidence that you can share with us about the real-world data and about other strains of the virus, the so-called South African, Brazil, and also different groups of population. How is the results, different ages, and also groups with chronic diseases? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Madam Carvalho. Next speaker, Madam Romana Jerkovic.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to all the presenters of today. It was very interesting and informative. You know, at the end of the discussion is clear. Despite all the efforts, we continue to face significant risk and bottlenecks in the production and distribution of vaccines. And moreover, new virus strains such as the UK one are further putting into question efficiency of existing vaccines. It's hard at the end of the discussion to address something that hasn't been touched on already today. We are all devoted and focused on solving the most crucial issues. I was interested very much in the same question as already Sarah Cerdas posed. So the question goes to Pfizer and Mr. Huang. What about the efficiency of the vaccine when stored in higher temperatures than those initially indicated? Is it true? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rasmus Andresen. Rasmus? Just press once the speak button. It's okay.
Please press the speak button once.
Yes, now I would like to address my questions to Pfizer. First of all, I would like to mention that together with BioNTech, you received a lot of public money. You got 100 million from the EIB, at least 375 million from the German government. And for us, this means that you have a special or a high responsibility also when it comes to transparency. And as I understood, you are agreeing on publishing the contract now. This is really good, but I would like to hear a little bit more on which parts of the contract you would like to see reducted. You have developed the vaccines with public money, and I think the European citizens have a right to get all of the information about the contracts. And the second question is it true that you asked Latin American governments, like journalists are reporting, to put sovereign assets like public infrastructure or buildings as a guarantee for their vaccine contracts? If you haven't done that, then please confirm this. If not,
thank you. Thank you so much, Rasmus. Last on the list, Antoni Comini Olivares. Please, you have the floor.
Sí, thank you, Mr. Chair. A la señora Wang.
To Mrs. Wang from Pfizer, I'd like to ask the following. She defended that we need a robust intellectual property system, but in this occasion, the level of risk taken on board by companies to develop their vaccinations is a lot lower than the normal development process, because there were pre-purchase agreements from the Commission which set aside millions of euros, and so the level of risk was a great deal lower than normal. So if IP is to offset the level of risk in development, they wouldn't need that much compensation because there wasn't the same level of risk. So let's admit these are vaccines that were partially developed through public funds, and so defending IP in the normal terms, I think, is not acceptable. Can we accept that? There's a WHO meeting that's going to be meeting, and I think that this will be fought for then.
We move to the last round of answers before having the statement from Thierry Breton. So we start with Angela Wang from Pfizer for 4 minutes.
All right, so question one on the investments into our program and the relationship with BioNTech. I'm going to actually combine questions because I know we won't have time to go through all of them one by one. Just again, to reinforce that Pfizer made the investments into this particular program, a $2 billion investment that we self-funded and we did at risk. Recognize that BioNTech has a partnership with us, but we need to remember that BioNTech is also an independent company, And part of their work is for themselves and their interests, and part of their work is with us as it pertains to this alliance and this particular COVID vaccine. And so for the COVID vaccine specifically, and for the work that we are doing with BioNTech only as it pertains to the COVID vaccine, we have funded $2 billion of our own money, and we didn't raise any of that. There were a number of questions related to Israel and the results that we're seeing from there. Indeed, the results coming from Israel are very, very encouraging, and they are very consistent with what we saw in our clinical trial. And this was a study that we were very much supportive of, because we knew that early on, having this real world evidence to demonstrate, to help us learn about the disease and the effectiveness of this vaccine was going to be very important. So more publications will be coming, but because you asked, I'll share with you some preliminary public data, and it's public, so it's something that's probably you may have seen, but for symptomatic control in this real world, in one HMO, we saw a 93.7% efficacy. For hospitalizations, a 93.3% efficacy, and for deaths, 93%. And again, this data is from one study. There are more studies continuing all the time, and that's why we are anxiously waiting to look at the full set of data to help understand what this is. And then just a quick nod to your comment about having digital systems. Yes, indeed, it is very helpful because it gives us the ability to real time track and understand who had received their vaccinations, and to be able to track their results and their symptoms and their outcomes. Back to the variants, because you asked it twice. Again, we are actively researching what it is that we need to do on the variants. In fact, today, Pfizer issued a press release to communicate the fact that we are initiating a booster study, and that we would be boosting those who have already received the first and second doses. They are now going to receive a third dose in some time frame, somewhere between 6 to 12 months, to see whether whether the immunity levels will be able to manage the effects of the new variants. But in addition to that, we are also working on understanding whether we may need a new vaccine altogether with a different genetic sequence. And so both of these approaches is what's going to allow us to deal with the new variants. And the good news, and what you should be very much assured of, is that it's because the mRNA technology is so flexible that with a change in genetic sequence, that's all we need to be able to create a new vaccine. And so we believe that it will take us about 100 days from the time that we start where we identify the code that we want to use to the time where we could have a viable vaccine. Again, we need to work with regulators to be able to understand, what kind of regulatory and approval pathway will be required. And I think it's also important to know that, again, because of the technology, what we need is the sequence, and the rest of the manufacturing process is identical. So we'll be able to manufacture this in very, very rapid order. Storage. Let me just finish maybe with the storage. You had asked about the storage capacity and whether it can be stored at higher temperatures. Again, good question. We are working on that. We are doing stability studies. And in fact, last week we had issued a press release to communicate that we are submitting data to regulatory agencies to see if they would agree to us storing our vaccine at -20. So that's a regular freezer temperature, which we do believe can facilitate storage for some vaccination sites. So this is an area of importance to us. We're working on additional formulations as well, but understanding the temperature storage is something that we will continue to publish on.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your answers. We move for 1 minute and a half to Paul Stoffel, and then 1 minute and a half for Thomas Triomphe.
Okay, so the question on how long would you maintain your network is that as long as needed. At the moment, we have no restraint on making sure that we maximize our capacity. If this is 1, 2, 3, or 4 years or longer, we'll do it, but it will depend on the need. In many times before, we have taken the risk there, like for Ebola and Zika, where the vaccine died out. So, the epidemic died out or was very limited, and therefore, hopefully, we never need this type of capacity again. But for the moment, we don't stop. On your question on is there a risk for other viruses? We are developing an HIV vaccine. We are upscaling for Ebola. We mitigate that with the smaller facilities we have where we can scale up at smaller scale. So hopefully we will not have any delay on the work that we can do there.
Thank you. And we move now to Thomas Triomphe for Sanofi. Thomas Triomphe is...
Mr. Triomphe, could you please press the speak button?
Can you hear me? Okay.
Okay.
Possible. Okay. So the matter of transparency, first of all, our contract has been published. In terms of the APA contract with the European Union, first of all. Second of all, on the IP landscape, indeed, as mentioned previously, we need a vibrant IP landscape in order to be able to develop new vaccines, and that's why there are new vaccines against COVID-19, thanks to my colleagues. Thirdly, I think it's important also to remember the collaboration we are doing with Johnson & Johnson or with BioNTech are good examples of collaborations that we can do without doing any changes to the IP environment. So I think these are important elements. Thirdly, there was a question from Ms. Trier-Lenoir about collaborations in the future. I believe there is indeed strong opportunities by working for the industry with European future, with HERA obviously, and by implementing new industrial networks in Europe through, for example, funding through IPCEI. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I will now, I thank Suri Moon as well, but there was no specific questions to her. So we are going, as we are very late, we thank you again. And we are going to move to the final conclusion of this session and hearing with Commissioner Breton for 5-7 minutes maximum.
Thank you